The ocean was calm that night, but Dr. Elias Kane knew better than to trust calm waters in the Mariana Trench. The research vessel Pacific Crest floated like a lonely shadow over the deepest part of Earth's oceans. Below it, in the cold blackness, their submersible Neptune drifted downward with Kane and 2 crew members inside. The world outside the thick glass dome was an endless dark, broken only by the pale glow of the sub's floodlights. Kane checked his instruments for the third time. The sonar still showed something strange beneath them, a solid surface, where there should be nothing but water and rock. The signal had been recorded for weeks, but no one could explain it. The deeper they went, the more the pressure groaned against the metal hull. Kane's heartbeat was steady, but his mind kept replaying the odd sound that had drawn them here in the first place. The first time he heard it, it had been faint, almost like a whale song, but too precise, too even, too artificial. Now in the cramped silence of the submersible, the sound returned low and metallic. A hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls and into their bones. They reached the depth, where the sonar marked the anomaly. The floodlights hit something impossible. A massive, curved surface stretched out ahead, so vast it disappeared into the dark. The light reflected off smooth metal that looked untouched by time, without rust or algae. Kane leaned forward, pressing his hand to the glass. It was no shipwreck. No human had ever built something this size. It was like staring at the hull of a sleeping giant buried under centuries of ocean and secrecy. His crewmate Ortega whispered that it looked like the side of a battleship. But battleships didn't stretch for miles in every direction. Kane asked for a slow approach. As the sub drew nearer, faint lines became visible, etched patterns across the surface. They were not scratches or damage. They were symbols. Geometric shapes intertwined like a language meant for machines. And then one of them began to glow. A cold blue light that pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm. The hum grew louder, and the water around them began to vibrate. Kane felt it in his chest, as if something deep below was waking up. Ortega reached for the comms, but the headset gave only static. The ship's systems flickered. Lights dimmed for a second, then came back on. Kane ordered the sub to rise, but before they could move, something darted out from the shadows beneath the hull. It was small compared to the massive structure, but still larger than the submersible itself. Its body was sleek, metallic, with fins that sliced through the water like blades. Its eyes glowed the same cold blue as the symbols. Ortega shouted as it came to a sudden stop in front of them. The machine hovered there, studying them, its strange gaze fixed on the humans inside. Then, without warning, it rushed forward and rammed the sub's side. The impact shook the cabin, throwing Kane against the control panel. Warning alarms screamed. He tried to steer away, but the drone struck again, harder. Cracks began to form along the outer lights. The pressure of the deep ocean was already deadly. One more hit could crush them in seconds. Ortega fired the emergency flares, a desperate attempt to distract it. The bright bursts of light scattered into the darkness, and for a moment, the machine paused. Kane seized the chance, ordering full ascent. The Neptune's engines groaned as it clawed upward through the crushing weight of the water. The blue-eyed drone followed for several seconds before it turned and disappeared back into the shadows. As if satisfied they were leaving, they broke the surface in under 10 minutes. Gasping in relief as the sub was hauled back aboard the Pacific Crest, Kane staggered out onto the deck, soaked in sweat despite the cold night air. The ship's captain asked what had happened, but when Kane tried to show the recorded footage, the file was gone. Every second of the device, the sonar logs too had been wiped clean. Ortega swore he had seen the blue symbols, but without proof, it sounded like a hallucination. Kane said nothing more. He stood at the railing, staring at the black water below. Somewhere under that calm surface lay a structure big enough to swallow cities, guarded by machines built to kill without hesitation. And in his bones, Kane knew, the hum was still there, waiting for the right moment to rise again. 2 weeks had passed since the dive, but the memory of that glowing hole refused to leave Kane's mind. He had tried to move on, throwing himself into routine research, yet every night he heard that deep hum in his dreams. The official report, filed by the Pacific Crest, labeled the incident as equipment malfunction and sonar misread, neatly erasing any trace of what really happened. Ortega avoided talking about it altogether, and the rest of the crew treated Kane like he had imagined the whole thing. Then one evening, a message arrived for him, no sender name, no return address, only a short line. If you want answers, meet me at Pier 7, midnight. It was raining when Kane reached the pier. A figure stood in the shadows under a street lamp, the hood of a navy coat pulled low. When she stepped into the light, Kane recognized her from old news broadcasts Admiral Mira. Holt retired years ago under mysterious circumstances. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, the kind of look that told him she already knew what he had seen. Without greeting, she handed him a sealed folder. Inside were black and white photographs, grainy, but clear enough to see vast metallic surfaces beneath ocean waves. Some were dated as far back as 1942. Kane's hands tightened on the pages. "You've seen it," she said quietly. "You touched it. That's why it activated." She led him to an old storage warehouse by the docks. Inside, under flickering lights, a massive map of Earth's oceans was spread across a table. Dozens of red circles marked locations far out at sea, from the Arctic to the South Pacific. Kane noticed that each was labeled "No-Go Zone" in military handwriting. These were drawn up during World War II, Holt explained, long before satellites. "My grandfather was part of a classified operation tracking something beneath the seas. Ships disappeared. Submarines vanished without a trace. We thought they were enemy attacks. They weren't." She slid an old sonar printout toward him, zigzagging lines that showed an outline of something so large it barely fit on the paper. "These aren't wrecks," she said. "They're ships. And they're not ours." Kane's pulse quickened. As he scanned the circles, one was exactly where the Neptune had gone down. Another was in the North Atlantic, where his grandfather's submarine had vanished in 1943. Kane remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell of coded letters and strange orders his grandfather received before disappearing. Back then, he had dismissed them as family myths. The connection was impossible to ignore. "Why me?" he asked. Holt's expression hardened, because the activation wasn't random. "Those ships are waiting for something, someone. The last time they stirred was over 70 years ago, and the Navy lost 3 destroyers before they went still again. You woke one. That means more will follow." Before Kane could respond, Holt turned on an old projector. Grainy film footage flickered to life, showing a blurry image of what looked like a massive hole breaking the ocean's surface, water pouring off it like a waterfall. The film cut abruptly to black. Holt didn't explain, and Kane didn't ask. Instead, she pointed to the map again. "I've been tracking seismic and sonar disturbances in all of these zones. In the past month, 6 have gone active. If even one ship surfaces in the open, every telescope in the galaxy will see it." Her words made Kane pause. "The galaxy," he repeated. She gave him a long look. "You think these things were built here, Dr. Kane?" "They're older than our history." The rain outside intensified, hammering against the warehouse roof. Holt stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If they wake fully, we won't be the only ones coming for them. Others will. And they won't care if Earth survives the fight." Kane felt a cold knot in his stomach. What hum he had heard wasn't just sound, it was a signal. Something out there might already have heard it. Somewhere beneath the black waters of the trench, the giant hull was still waiting, its symbols pulsing in the dark. Kane knew then that whatever was coming, it wouldn't be a discovery. It would be a reckoning. The storm had been raging for 3 days over the Pacific when the first report came in. A fishing vessel off the coast of the Philippines claimed to have seen a mountain rise from the sea, dripping water and blocking the sunrise. The crew swore. It was moving. At first, the world dismissed it as superstition or a misread of the waves, but then came the second report, then the third. Satellite images started to show strange disturbances, perfect circular ripples stretching for miles, spreading from points deep beneath the ocean surface. Admiral Holt didn't wait for official confirmation. She called Kane before dawn and told him to meet her at a secure naval base. When he arrived, she showed him live sonar feeds that made his skin crawl. Shapes, massive, uniform, and moving, were slowly rising from the depths in multiple locations across the planet. The outlines were unmistakable. They were ships. Within hours, Kane and Holt were aboard the Orion, stealth submersible fitted with experimental propulsion designed for deep trench navigation. Their destination was the original site from the Neptune dive. As they descended, Kane's hands gripped the railing harder than he realized. The hum had returned, louder than before, vibrating through the hull like the steady beat of an enormous heart. Holt said nothing, her eyes locked on the forward screens. When the floodlights came on, the sight that greeted them stole the air from Kane's lungs. The great metallic wall was still there, but now it was lit from within, lines of blue light racing across its surface in patterns that seemed alive. The symbols glowed brighter, as if acknowledging their presence. The Orion edged forward until they reached a jagged opening. An entrance Kane was certain had not been there before. Without hesitation, Holt guided the vessel inside. They passed through what felt like a thin wall of light, and suddenly the instruments went wild. Pressure readings dropped. Temperature stabilized. Kane looked out and froze. They were no longer surrounded by water, but by air inside, an impossibly vast cavern hidden beneath the ocean floor. In that space, row upon row of warships rested. In silence, each one the size of a skyscraper, their black hulls gleaming under an unseen light source. Some were sleek like blades. Others bristled with massive weapon ports. They were lined in perfect formation, stretching so far back that the end could not be seen. Kane counted at least hundreds, maybe thousands. Holt's voice was low, almost reverent, as she said, "This is only one hangar, and there are dozens like it across the world." As they drifted deeper into the cavern, Kane noticed a single ship standing apart from the others, far larger and shaped like a predator ready to strike. Its blue lines pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat. Without warning, the cavern trembled. A deep, resonant sound rolled through the air, and the massive ship's engines ignited with a thunderous roar. Waves of force knocked the Orion back. Several meters' panels shook. Kane braced himself as the great vessel slowly lifted from its cradle. Water from somewhere above began flooding in, but it didn't slow the ship. Instead, it rose like it had been waiting for centuries for this exact moment. Holt's hands flew over the controls, pulling the Orion away from its path. "It's awake," she said through clenched teeth. Kane couldn't tear his eyes away. From the ship's surface, as more blue symbols lit up, forming an unbroken stream of light from bow to stern. The sound it emitted was not random, it was deliberate, rhythmic, like a signal. And somewhere far beyond Earth's skies, Kane knew someone or something was hearing it. The thought sent a shiver through him. If one ship waking caused this much disturbance, what would happen when all of them rose? As the giant vessel moved toward a massive gate at the cavern's edge, Holt's voice was tight with urgency. "Need to leave now, before it notices us." Kane didn't ask what would happen if it did. He already had an idea, and it was nothing Earth was ready to face. 3 days after the awakening in the cavern, every major listening post on Earth picked up a strange broadcast. It wasn't in any known human language, but the translation software at the Naval Command worked fast enough to produce a chilling message. "To all fleets, the Earth arsenals are stirring. Destroy them before the last human commanders return." The words repeated again and again, bouncing through space on frequencies meant to carry across light years. Admiral Holt stood with Kane in the darkened operations room as the playback ended. No one on the team spoke. The weight of those words pressed down like a physical thing. Kane's mind spun. Whoever sent this message knew what the warships were and feared them. Holt pulled up a holographic display of the solar system. Several bright red markers pulsed near its outer edges. "They're already moving," she said grimly. "Fleets from somewhere out there. They get here before we understand what these ships can do. We're finished." She then showed him something else, archival files she had been keeping, secret even from her own allies. They were ancient star maps, old enough that the ink on the vellum-like material had faded. The symbols on the maps were almost identical to those Kane had seen glowing on the warship's hull. According to her notes, they told a story. 10,000 years ago, humans had commanded the largest and most feared navy in the galaxy. Nobody knew why or how it had ended, but at some point, The fleet had been hidden on Earth, sleeping in the deep until it was needed again. Kane struggled to believe it, but the evidence was too much to ignore. Every record pointed to one terrifying truth. The ships responded to human DNA. He was living proof. When he had touched the hull during the first dive, it had activated. Holt's theory was simple and frightening. The warships had been locked to prevent alien control, waiting only for a human to wake them. Kane couldn't stop thinking about the message's wording, the last human commanders. It implied that somewhere, somehow, humanity had once ruled beyond Earth, and these ships had been their ultimate weapon. The more they studied the alien broadcast, the worse it became. Encrypted within the message were coordinates, not for other aliens to gather, but for attack. Kane realized with horror that dozens of alien fleets were converging on Earth, not to invade in the traditional sense, but to destroy the warships before they could rise. And they weren't the only ones watching. Another unknown signal had been detected, faint, but growing stronger, like an answer to the warning. Holt suspected it came from the ships themselves, possibly reaching out to others of their kind across the galaxy. In the following hours, Kane and Holt returned to the Orion to survey the cavern again. This time, 2 more ships were missing, from their cradles, leaving behind massive empty docks. The air inside seemed charged, as if the very walls hummed with quiet anticipation. Kane stood on the observation deck of the sub, staring into the dark rows of silent giants, and knew they wouldn't remain silent much longer. If the alien fleets wanted to stop Earth's arsenals, they would have to come soon. But a single question gnawed at him more than any other. If the warships had been built to defend humanity, then who exactly were they meant to defend against? Before he could ask Holt, the cavern shook with a deep, distant boom. Somewhere beyond the gate, a sound like tearing metal echoed through the air. Holt's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't from here," she said. "That came from orbit." Kane's stomach sank. The first alien fleet had arrived. At dawn, the ocean along the coasts of several continents began to heave in unnatural swells. From the shorelines of Japan to the cliffs of Ireland, people stood in stunned silence as enormous black shapes pushed upward through the waves. First came the peaks of colossal hulls, then towering spires and weapon arrays that glistened in the early light. Water cascaded off them in roaring waterfalls as they rose higher, blotting out the horizon. Each one moved with deliberate precision, the ocean boiling around their massive frames. News drones caught the first clear images, warships larger than skyscrapers, each bristling with alien weaponry. They did not bear any flag or insignia known to mankind, yet they moved as if they were a single unified fleet. From the deck of the Orion, Kane and Holt watched the impossible unfold. The cavern hangar they had entered days earlier was now nearly empty. The warships that had slept for millennia were surfacing across the planet, their hulls glowing faintly with the same cold blue patterns Kane had touched. They did not fire a single shot. They simply floated above the oceans in perfect formation, silent but menacing. Kane realized with a chill that they were awaiting orders that only a human could give, above Earth. The alien fleet had arrived in full force. Dozens of ships, sleek and insect-like, hovered beyond the atmosphere, scanning the surface. Holt's communications array crackled with intercepted chatter between alien commanders. They were in shock. Their sensors could not comprehend the sheer number of vessels on Earth. "They're afraid," Holt said flatly. "Good, let them be." Yet fear could make enemies reckless. Kane knew it was only a matter of time before someone fired the first shot. Without warning, a deep, resonant voice filled the Orion's bridge. It came not from any radio, but from everywhere at once. Kane looked around until his eyes landed on the largest ship in the formation, a leviathan of black metal, its bow shaped like a spearhead. A column of light projected from its surface, forming a figure on the bridge beside him. It was a tall, armored being made of shifting light, with no face, only a glowing core where its heart should be. "Commander of the last armada," it spoke, addressing Kane directly. "The galaxy waits for your will." Holt froze. Kane's mouth went dry. "I'm not your commander," he said slowly. The figure tilted its head. Your touch woke us. Your blood matches the key. The Armada is yours to command. Kane stepped closer, his voice tight. And if I give no order? The figure's core brightened. Then we remain. 8. But the enemy will not wait. Already their weapons are aimed at your world. Holt took him aside, her voice low. Kane, if you give the wrong order, these things could burn half the galaxy. But if you give no order, Earth might not survive the day. Kane looked out at the vast fleet, their black hulls gleaming like obsidian blades against the morning sky. Above, the alien ships began to shift into attack positions. The air felt heavy, charged with the tension of a storm about to break. That moment, Kane understood that every decision he made from here would change not only Earth's future, but the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The warships had risen, and the galaxy's eyes were upon them. The first alien volley lit up the upper atmosphere like a false dawn. Dozens of plasma lances tore through the sky, aimed directly at the rising fleet. Kane barely had time to register the attack before the warships responded. There was no flare of missiles, no thunder of cannons, just an eerie flash of distortion in the air, and then the alien projectiles vanished as if they had never existed. Moments later, the alien ships themselves began to disappear, one by one, erased from the void without a single explosion. Kane stood frozen on the Orion's bridge, watching entire fleets dissolve into nothingness. The fleet mind's voice echoed around him, calm and precise. Threat eliminated, awaiting next directive. Above the oceans, the black leviathans began to move in unison. Their hulls shimmered as if reality bent around them, and in the blink of an eye they were gone from the horizon, leaving only towering walls of water crashing back into the sea. Holt's radar lit up with impossible readings the ships had. Jumped to hyperspace without leaving any trace or opening any portal. That's not supposed to be possible, Holt muttered. Every known hyperdrive leaves a signature, but they just vanished. Kane's comms crackled with faint transmissions. They weren't coming from Earth, they were coming from deep space. Alien outposts were reporting sightings of the fleet across dozens of star systems, appearing without warning, holding formation over alien capitals, and then disappearing again. No shots were fired, no demands were made. It was not a war. It was a message. The galaxy was being reminded that humanity's armada was awake once more. On the Orion. Kane replayed the fleet mind's earlier words in his head. The galaxy waits for your will. Earth's leaders were already arguing over what to do. Some wanted the fleet to stay hidden, to avoid provoking the countless civilizations beyond their skies. Others saw a chance to reclaim humanity's place among the stars. To rebuild lost colonies and forge alliances or conquer, if necessary. Kane stood at the center of it all, knowing that the fleet would follow only him. That night, under a sky unspoiled by city lights, Kane stood alone on the deck, staring at the ocean where the first ship had risen. He thought of the glowing hull, beneath the waves, of the drone that had rammed his sub, of Holt's warnings, and of the alien fleets that had come so close to destroying Earth. He thought of the maps, of the red circles scattered across the globitch marking another hangar, like the one he had seen. 1,000,000 warships, sleeping still, waiting. When Holt joined him, she didn't speak at first. She simply looked out at the dark water with him. Finally, Kane said quietly, "They won't stay hidden forever." Holt's answer was just as soft. Maybe that's the point. In the distance, lightning flashed across the horizon. And for a moment, Kane could almost imagine the shadow of a giant hull rising from the deep again. Somewhere out there, above alien skies, his fleet was moving. And the galaxy, whether it was ready or not, would soon know exactly why humanity had once been feared.